What's up, cycling fans? We're back. We got Pack Chatter coming at you with a great episode, a gravelicious episode, if you will. Before we get started, let's hit some sponsors. We're sponsored by the New York State Bicycle Racing Association. That's NYSBRA. NYSBRA is filled with lots of great resources for racers all over New York, and they are vital in our existence in terms of amateur racing in the state. There's some big changes going on there, so please check out their website, Facebook page, show them some support. It's really a group of really great, hardworking people. I can tell you I'm a very, 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 very small part of what goes on there, and I'm proud to be associated with the people who are doing the real work there and everything that they've contributed to the sport. We are also sponsored by Legacy Bikes. That's Legacy with an I. Christmas is very, very close, so hit them up and get your kid that balance bike under the tree. There's nothing better than a bike on Christmas, and you can get it with Legacy Bikes. We're also sponsored by the Dirty Bikes Gravel Series. I'm really excited to roll this out. Registration is open. We've got 4 races this year instead of 3. We're expanding to 2 new events in those 4 races, and we have 3 new race promoters and 1 returning that are taking part as part of our team here. It's a really exciting venture. I'm going to put out a video in the next couple weeks that gives you some more details about it. But it's a great format for gravel racing. It's a unique style. It's a kind of our own in New York, a punchier, shorter, more racy style of gravel than what you get in as opposed to some of these longer, more ultra endurance events. And they're put on by great people, and they're good parties. So check us out on ridelcc.com. Follow Dirty Bikes on Facebook, and I will be posting some video updates on the details of the series in the next week or 2. Also, please check out my latest short interview with junior national champ Miles Mattern. He's a great kid. He's a Western New York kid. I always like getting the kids on the show and talking about their accomplishments. And he won a national championship in cyclocross last weekend. I did a little piece with him just the other night. That's available on our website and the YouTube channel. So please check out Miles. All right, on to the episode. I love this episode. I'm a huge fan of Selene Yeager's and her book Gravel. It's phenomenal. It's got something in it for every rider, whether you're brand new to gravel or you've been doing it for a while. And she's just a wonderful authority on cycling in general. She's written 30 books. She's done every event on the planet. She's just a really, really wonderful person to talk to. We could have gone on for a couple more hours, and I hope she'll come on again. I really enjoyed it. It was a pleasure to be able to speak with her. So without any more babbling from me, enjoy your holidays. Please subscribe to our podcast on whatever app you follow or you find your podcasts on. And we'll be back with you probably the end of January, beginning of February as we take a little break here. But in the meantime, enjoy Selene Yeager.
You'll never go out on a training ride and dig that deep.
Awesome. We won gold.
They're life rides.
I'm like, dude, I'm still figuring this out.
Lose sight of the fact that it's whoever goes faster.
This isn't a road race. This isn't a mountain bike race.
The sensei of sprint, Todd Shesky.
My eyes are coming out of my head. Just get in here.
So we are on with the master of gravel, Selene Yeager. How are you, Selene? Thanks for joining us.
I am great. How are you?
Awesome. Great to be talking to you. I'm getting geared up for our spring gravel series. So I just got done with your book, and I'm really excited to talk a lot about gravel tonight.
Let's do it.
All right. So
what is your gravel series? Like how many are in that series? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Okay, you can interview me. That's awesome.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's great. Let's talk about
I do a podcast too.
Turns the tables.
I'm sorry. I just went into my writer mode. I'm in my office, and maybe that's a problem. Sorry.
I love it when we get that dynamic with people who interview other people on a regular basis. We do a series called the Dirty Bike series. It's this year it's 4 races. It's always been 3 in the past, and we added 2 new races to the schedule so that it goes a little further into central New York, and we have a couple in western New York. And we're a short distance sort of racing. We're kind of like if if Dirty Kansas is the Boston Marathon, we're like your local 5K series where you can come out and hit 35 to 45 mile races once a month and get them
That's
scored
cool.
as a series. So we got some really cool terrain in this part of the state that features some real fun gravel, but it's not that, got to train and race 200 miles sort of thing.
That's cool. I think there's a space for that. I really, really, really do. Well, everybody is going ultra, ultra, ultra. I think there's a need. Honestly, I think there's a need for that. Like a race that does not take all day or 12 hours. I mean, I think that fits I think there are people looking for that too. Is that the New Paltz area? Is that where you guys are? Or
No,
not?
we're like,
Okay.
yeah, Finger Lakes for those. So
Oh, okay.
we're in both
Yeah,
Todd
yeah,
and I are right around Rochester, but the races are all around the Finger Lakes region.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's beautiful country.
Yeah, we got some great dirt around here, and like you said, I think not everybody can or wants to do those long ones, and people who do still need those shorter races for training
Totally.
and all that kind of good stuff. So it's a nice sort of mix for, especially we've seen a lot of road races drop off the calendar on our sort of regionally.
Yeah.
So kind of replacing them with something that people seem a little more into doing is nice for those road racers and cross racers, and kind of brings those crowds together, as well as the people similar to the longer events who just want to conquer the distance. Because even though they're short, there's a lot of elevation.
Yeah.
The gravel roads aren't paved because they're on some climbs most of the cases, so they're hard. So you definitely get out and finish them, kind of a thing. Not the same way you're finishing Dirty Kansas, but certainly a hard day. So
we have similar in Pennsylvania. I mean, I know how those hills are. So cool.
Yeah, except you guys don't have shoulders.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you have telephone poles like 6 inches from the road and things, but probably not so much on the gravel ones. But I think it's an East Coast kind of trait. You really get these sharp pitches they're not particularly very long, but they're 2K at the most, but they're 10, 15% or more in some cases, especially on the dirt, right? Where
we do
paving,
one,
right?
called Monkey Knife Fight, where it races just up the hardest dirt climbs we have, and there's one that hits like 27 to 30% right in the middle of it. It's not that long, but you're almost going backwards. It's like all you can do.
Right.
Yeah, I was thinking about coming down for that one. It's funny you bring that up. My brother-in-law and my sister-in-law live right in your area, and he was talking about the guy who runs that. I think they work together, actually.
Who's that?
My brother-in-law works at Lehigh. So he was mentioning, I think the guy who runs the Monkey Knife Fight.
The guy who runs the Monkey Knife Fight is my husband.
Oh, worked at Lehigh?
So you know the promoter.
And he works at Lehigh. Yeah, so I do. I know.
I didn't realize that was my brother-in-law. I'll send you a message afterward. But yeah, they work together. He's a professor there. I didn't realize that.
That's awesome. All right.
Yeah, because he asked me about that ride, and I said, yeah, I'd heard about that one. So that's cool.
So
yeah, but to your point, the unpaved, no winter maintenance roads are stupid steep. That's why they're not paved.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but yeah, and you're always in like the two elements that usually keep me shining away: climbs and dirt. So I'm always looking for flat, smooth, flat and fast. I want flat and fast, but it's
a velodrome here that you might like.
Yes, I do actually like T-Town an awful lot. I've spent a lot of laps down there, and yeah, it's a fantastic venue for sure.
It really is.
So the world class for sure, and you guys get world class competition down there on those UCI races, and it's a excellent. And the whole area down there is fantastic. I mean, mountain biking, and you come from a mountain biking background as well, so that probably slotted in really well because there's so much good mountain biking down there, right?
Yeah, there really is, and it's not, epically long rides per se, but one of the things I appreciate about it is there's probably 3 to 4 different trail systems within, maybe a 5 to 7 mile ride from my house. I don't have to drive, and it's just like, it's nice. I can just go out before work or lunch or after work and just get a really solid couple hours in, on the mountain, which without ever putting a bike on a car, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, you guys have some of my favorite mountain biking that I've ever done has been right in that area at times with my brother-in-law quite frequently. So definitely some cool stuff. Right on the Lehigh campus, even some of it.
That's awesome stuff. That is
Yeah.
really fun stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's enough to beat me up on the rocks, but not like going to Emmaus where I'm like I can't even begin to stay on those rock gardens and all that
That
stuff
is
there.
right. That is my. I'm 2 blocks away from those trails. I ride those.
Oh,
On. Yeah.
those are tough.
Yeah, they are.
But let's talk a little bit about your book.
Okay.
It's wonderful for any sort of level of a gravel rider. If you've never ridden any gravel at all, you've got some beautiful beginner stuff in there, and certainly if you're experienced with it, there's also a lot of really good stuff. What kind of prompted the process to say, okay, I'm gonna write a book about gravel? Because you've written several books. So what kind
Yeah.
of brought you to the gravel book?
Well, it's funny because the one right before this one I wrote was Climb, which was about climbing, which was a complete, just something I wanted to do. I thought I like climbing, and it was the same kind of thing. Like people either love it or they hate it, or they love to hate it. But it's the kind of thing that's kind of good for everybody to do, and it's just this thing that I think captures all cyclists' imaginations in some way, shape, or form, and they'd like to be better at it. So I was just like, I'm gonna write a book about climbing, and I had a lot of fun with it. I talked to physicists. I'm like, what's the steepest thing you could ride a bike up? And he like drew me diagrams, and you know, it was fun. I talked to people, and wrote about my own experiences, and the book did really well. It sold out of Amazon like 3 times. So I was like,
Wow,
okay,
nice.
like
Nice.
yeah, there's something going on here. Um, and then Rodale at the time, now it's Hearst, came to me and they were like, "You want to do another like little niche book?" I was like, "Sure do." And I was like, "What should I do?" And there was all kinds of things bannered around, and I was doing myself. I've been doing a lot of this gravel stuff for quite a while, and I was at an event where it was more like a. Are you familiar with a grinduro is? It's
Mhm.
like, yeah, those segment, but they're gnarly. I mean, they're not just, it's not just gravel roads, right? Like you're
Right.
on some single track, you're on some stuff that a mountain bike would be better suited for often. And it was called Keystone Gravel. It's in the middle of the state in the Pine Grove Forest. It's wicked cool, but you have to know what you're getting into. Like, like some of the people who were there had done like a Kansas, not something that long, but they'd done some stuff in the Midwest. They had done unpaved here,
Hmm.
which is beautiful gravel roads. And they're like, "Oh, gravel, this is great." And they sign up for this thing. And, at the end of the day, this guy sits down next to me with a beer. He's like, "That was not fun for me." He's like,
Right.
he's like, is that gravel? And I was like, well, that's a good question. And that the same exchange happened at Rebecca's Private Idaho, the stage race, where, her main event is very much gravel, but the stage race, the first stage has 16 miles of single track in it. And there were people that just did not know what to do with it. And a woman literally said the same words when we were riding together the next day. She's like, "That was not fun for me." And I thought, people just like, there's a need here, like to talk about like, what is gravel? What does this mean? Because it's everywhere, right? And people,
Hmm.
there is no real one definition. But so I just was like, okay, I could tell people like, this is what it is, because there's lots of people still like, oh, gravel, whatever. They have no idea what it's about. So like, this is what it is. This is why people are excited about it. This is what you might find. This is what you might like. This is what you might not like. Then this is how like to sort of navigate the landscape as it currently is, and then just do all this stuff that I do. Talk about training, talk about nutrition, talk about the mental game, and I'm super stoked on it. Like I get super nervous whenever a bike book comes out because you live with it for a while and you go through periods where you're like, this is the worst thing I've ever done and it sucks and everyone's going to hate it and it's going to get nothing but 1-star reviews on Amazon and you're never going to work again. And that's kind of the headspace I'm in by the time it comes out. But so I'm always very happy when people like you say, "Hey, you did a good job." So that's the history of gravel there in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So
So what is
I was gonna jump in real quick on your climb book because you're saying people liked it and you sold out on it like 3 times on Amazon and I was and like I mean there's a lot of publication out there and I was getting these messages because there's a quote in there that because I submitted some stuff and we had some discussion on climbing and I worked with some climbers and so there's some quote in there and people are like, how did you get quoted on a book on climbing because I'm such a non-climber, right? So it was just really funny. I was like, wow, but I was also really pleased that so many people were reading it as well.
Yeah,
And I
right. It's
think
cool.
it's, you really hit a chord with a lot of people on that. So I'm not surprised that it sold out, because people that I didn't expect were sending me a message going like, "Hey, you're quoted in this climb book," which I thought was unusual for somebody that doesn't do much climbing. I'm like, well, I don't do it, but I can get other people to do it. So,
Well,
but
yeah, yes. I mean, that's legitimate source. I mean, you've worked with people who are also good at it, right? And that's
exactly.
part of it.
So yeah,
But
and then but
yeah.
it speaks to the kind of the cross demographic of hitting a lot of different things when you kind of, and I think the gravel is similar to that, and I think you're kind of you're finding that commonality, and like you said, you're at these gravel events, and people are like, what is this? And you kind of say, you have the sense of being able to pick up like, yeah, people kind of need some definition, like, well, what is this exactly? How do I approach this? What can I expect? And it's not
Totally.
just mountain bikers, or it's not just road riders. It's kind of, and it's really developmental right now, right? I mean, it's still in its,
Oh,
would you say it's
absolutely.
still in its really kind of trying to figure it all out mode?
Largely, I think it very much is. I mean, I think that it's a little past introductory phase, but it's still on that trajectory. Where a lot of people are coming into it and not knowing exactly what it is or what kind of bike they really would be best suited for. And I think that part of the appeal of both of these books, honestly, is that I also use a lot of experiential anecdotes. Just telling people like, this is where I messed up. Like, this is where these are the things that can happen. Like, this is what it looks like when you go in and you don't know what's going on. And I think that people can just relate to that, because I think a lot of people think that coaches or whatever, they just always know what's up. But like, we learn by trial and error too. So I think it just helps to sort of be like, hey, I'm not coming at you from above. I'm coming at you right on even ground here. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
it's
think a lot of people, when they do gravel for the first time, they go through a lot of those experiences because, like you said, you don't. It's a lot of times you're not really sure what you're getting into, just
well,
in
like
general,
Kansas,
but with the
that's
courses and
why I
stuff.
opened the book with that. I had no
Right.
idea what I was getting into. I kept looking at those tires going, are you serious that I need these? I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I was like, these tires look ridiculous. Because that was the first time I had ever ridden on like, and I only had 38s, which now is just normal. But
very,
Right.
at the time, that was 2013. I had never, all the quote unquote gravel stuff I had done here, I had never put tires that big on my bike. And I was just like, I don't know. This seems ridiculous. And then I got out there and I was like, okay, I get it. Like, all right, now I get it. But I had no idea. I'd never seen roads like that.
Yeah, well,
right.
that's where your category system is really nice in terms of the different kind of terrain and the way you categorize that. Can you tell us a little about like where that came from? Is that something you developed, or is that something you took from somewhere? It'd be nice to kind of see that kind of a little bit more standardized, just so that when you're explaining to racers they can be in for, they kind
Totally.
of know what it
Totally.
is.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's hard because the courses change and it's all a little subjective. I can't tell you how much I tortured myself with some of that. Like, I'm like, is Rasputin really 2 or is it a 3? And I know, like,
Right,
literally
right.
just went back and forth. But I can't take full credit for that by any stretch. Neil Shirley sort of got that ball rolling, and he did it sort of tongue in cheek. Like, he's like, I'm gonna do an international standard of, like, kind of being funny, but then when he put it together, he was like, "This is actually kind of useful,"
Yeah.
So, but he put it together, and it was very West Coast centric because he's in California, so a lot of it was California based, and I had seen it. He had blogged about it for maybe Envy at the time, wherever he was working at the time. I said, Can I swipe some of this from you and credit you and then build on it?" He's like, "Go for it." So it sort of, I took it from him and rolled with it a little further. And then I also used the same system to talk about tires, which is like,
Right.
giving like, okay, 26 to 30 is road territory. Just really, you're looking at roads that are just maybe not paved, but not gnarly gravel. And then just sort of went up from there. And I think I do think it's super useful. It's just a starting point, but people often just don't even know where to start.
Yeah, and with more events coming out and like big events and people kind of being able to see videos and things, at least.
Yeah.
Then you can attach the events to it, and I think that's really helpful
Totally.
too. When you say like Batten Kill's a 1 and
Yeah.
Grinduro's a 4, like okay,
Yeah.
well now I can kind of get an idea of what that means. But I think I did see similar on Envy's website a few years ago. Maybe that's where that was coming from.
That was it. Neil had done a little thing, and it was almost a throwaway. I mean, he was really just trying to be funny, and then he was like, and Yuri Halswell had picked it up, I think, and talked to him on some blog or paid. It might have been on the podcast. Anyway, it made some small rounds, but more like Inside Baseball. And I was like, this is really much more useful than Inside Baseball. I think like more people could benefit from this.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think more people need to start putting it on their races and on the events so that kind of get an idea. Because I get that question all the time. People want to know, well, like, what tire size should I use? Can I ride a road bike? And I hate to tell people like, well, this is what you should use because I don't know, that varies a little bit in terms of ability and stuff. So having that kind of system of like, well, this is how we would categorize it compared to other events, and then you can kind of decide which is right for you.
Totally. And people say that all the time. They're like, well, we did all this on road bikes, and a lot of things you could totally, and I did do. You wouldn't do Kansas on a road bike. I mean, but you could do some of our events here for sure. You could do on a road bike, and I have. But we also had far less fun. Like if it was muddy, they packed up instantly, and there were a lot of flat tires. So disc brakes and tubeless have like kicked down the door, I think, for really enjoying the gravel scene. I think it's one of the few cases where the technology just blasted open the door.
Yeah, I think in ours we've even seen definitely could do them on road bikes, and then early on it was a lot of cross tires, and now that 38 to 40 is kind of becoming the standard instead of that 32 or 33 that was the standard 5 years ago.
Yeah, you guys say
they
that
also roll so nice.
Yeah, did you Celine? Did you happen to catch the last edition of Bicycle Retailer magazine? I don't know if you subscribe to it or not, but because you probably get a bunch of stuff rolling across your desk.
Yeah, I look at it online mostly, so I don't know if.
Right, but they have this trend of and it was really interesting. This trend of the gravel tire widths over the last few years, and how in like the last 2 or 3, it's just shot up for like the median tire width is now like 40. Right, and it was like almost nobody like 6 years ago.
Nobody.
So it's interesting to see that,
I think they're rolling so much better. Like I run those Schwalbe all arounds, the G1s. Those things roll great on pavement. I mean, you can get tires now that are big but aren't piggish. They're not sluggish when you get them on the road.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the WTV Nanos in the book, and I just started those like a month ago, and I think those roll because a lot of times when we're out, we ride a lot of gravel just on group rides with my buddies, but a lot of times we're piecing together a trail with some pavement. Most kind of a thing, right? So those seem to roll pretty well. I got those on a recommendation from somebody, and then I saw them in your book afterward. I was kind of stoked on them.
Yeah no, that's how most people ride, right? I mean, most people don't have all that continuous gravel, so they have to put together stuff. So here we might do a little single track to a bunch of pavement to a few of our favorite dirt roads, and you can do it all on like one bike and a good set of tires, and not flat. It's like it's a great day.
Yeah, so it was funny, you mentioned back, years ago, because people were showing up with either road bikes or, with cyclocross bikes, but there was just a lot more flat tires, right? There's this event up here, and I don't think it goes on anymore, but this was a number of years ago, and man, I'm going to say maybe 8 years ago. It's called Race the Wind, and it was up at the wind farm up in the Tug Hill Plateau up in northern New York. Yeah, it might be gone now. But they basically did this fire trail race, right? This was the early, nobody was talking about gravel, right? I mean, cross was on its upswing.
Yeah.
So I decided I'm going to get this cross bike. So I bought this used cross bike off a friend who just sold it, and I was like, yeah, this is great. And I had I had 30s on this thing, right? And which seemed pretty fat. I'm I'm a
sure
roadie,
they did.
right? So I'm like, oh, these look pretty big, And I'm gonna be all tricked because tubeless was just starting to really kind of come around, right? And so I'm like, I'm riding tubeless. It's gonna be great. I'll kick a couple tubes just in case, but I'm gonna be fine because I got these tubeless. All these other guys getting pinch flats, right? So I duct tape a couple tubes tubes onto my bike and we take off. And I think it was Matt Dickinson and Corey Burns and man, I think Dan Timmerman might have been there, and Ryan and I myself. We wind up getting in this group, but those guys are just going so fast, right? I'm just kind of staring at the ground, just trying to be like, all right, man, they're going pretty hard on this gravel stuff, right? We hit this rocky section though. And first one that goes is Ryan. He had tubulars on, cyclocross tubulars. Bam, double flats. He's done, right? And and I'm over here going like, oh, I'm glad I got these tubeless. And don't I crush this rock and I bend my rim. And so much for my tubeless, right? Because I got 30s on, and those guys are riding like 34s or something, and they were just gone. Never saw them again, right? And I'm over there trying to like, I got sealant going all over. I'm ripping out the thing. I'm trying to put the tube in now. I'm going through all this stuff. Guys are past me, then I pass those guys, and I got more flats. I'm pinch flat. I went through all my tubes. Long story short, I went through all my tubes. I had to get a ride back on this four-wheel gator thing out in the middle of nowhere, but just totally like it was such a hodgepodge. I was like, it was this crazy thing, right? But we were so far ahead. I was sitting there waiting for like 45 minutes for this gator to show up, and there were still guys riding, right? Because it was just, but the range of equipment though, because there was no gravel bike. There was nobody was riding 38s or 40s. We were like, I don't know, cyclocross tires. And I'm like, I'm going to try these trick, tubeless things. They're 30s, but they'll be great, and we just had
even been disc brakes, right?
This bike I have is this Cannondale cyclocross. Tony's seen it. I took it on a gravel ride. It's heavy as granite, right? And this thing weighs probably 30 pounds. It's a tank, but it has disc brakes on it. It does have discs, but I didn't have a problem with stopping. I had a problem with keeping going.
Well, for sure, I get that, but I think it's not as much the stopping, even though that's a nice touch for discs, but it does keep things from packing up if it were to get muddy. If it were to I think that's a huge benefit of the discs too, is you don't have the calipers getting all gunked up.
Right. And if you have carbon rims, is obviously you're not sanding them down with gravel all the time, right? I was always amazed when people ride in cyclocross and they have these nice carbon, 50 millimeter rims, and it's like, man, you hear the scraping every time, and it's like, wow, this is pretty abusive to these wheels and stuff, and to think about, that braking now having the discs on there, seems like that alone makes it worth to have nice wheels for riding in mud.
Totally.
But yeah, I mean, we were completely on the whole point of my longer story there was that we were just all unprepared and like nobody knew, and it seems like it's starting to hone down. And in the book, it seems like you're getting your arms around and really kind of pulling a lot of it together. So an old roadie like me, if I'm like, man, I'm going to do some gravel, I this kind of this go-to gravel Bible now.
That's why I put the which I haven't talked about in a lot of the interviews I've done for it, but I deliberately did that. It really is kind of about the bike section. Like, it's not about the bike, but it is about the bike, because even within gravel bikes now, there's a giant range. It started with just a couple, but now you go, I think, from one end of the spectrum where you have like a diverge sort of thing with Specialized, which is, I have an open upper. That's my road bike. That's very road-centric geometry on that thing. But all the way to like a Salsa Cutthroat, which is a drop bar mountain bike, right? Mm-hmm. Or Niner and Magic Carpet Ride, which is the dual suspension gravel bike. So I think even within, like, it's important to know what you want to do with it. Like, what do you want to do with this bike? And then you can sort of hone in on the type of gravel bike. Because I do believe it can be your one and only for a lot of things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And I look at that heavy cyclocross bike that and I always get all, I get all jealous looking at we're out there in that night ride that I did with Tony, right? Now these guys are kicking my butt up this hill, and I'm like going, I'm dragging this cinder block around, right? And of course I'm going to blame the bike. It had nothing to do with me. But and I go like, oh, maybe we should buy this lighter bike. I'm like, really this bike serves a lot of purposes, because I also have a pair of 28 millimeter road tires. I just swap the wheels, and when it's kind of cruddy out in the winter, I just ride that. And I'm like, if I'm not on my fixed gear with fenders on, I'm like, there's a lot of sand on the road, a lot of stuff making flats. I'll just ride these 28s and I'll be good, So it's easy to swap them out, and it becomes this kind of this multi-purpose utilitarian bike.
Totally. I 100% agree. And there are
Yeah.
some that you can even put, I mean, some of those bikes you can put 50s on. You can put a mountain bike wheel on.
Sure.
You can switch, and it's very utilitarian.
I think I was talking to it was Scott Bass. We were riding yesterday, and we were all riding fixed gears. So music to my ears, right? So we're out there riding
Mhm.
fixed, and we were talking about gravel bikes and different things, and he was saying on his he can almost get like a 2-inch tire on there or something like
Yeah.
that. And I'm like, so basically, you can make this a mountain bike.
Yep.
So,
That is what he's saying.
yep. But it's cool that it seems almost funny that we have this division of gravel, right? Like this, we have a gravel bike, but really, if you get a good gravel bike, you could race cross easily on
Yeah.
on a decent gravel bike.
Which
And
Jessica Bush did, right? On his Open. He
yeah,
did yeah.
so there you go. I mean, it's kind of becomes this multi-purpose kind of. As much as it's specialized, it's also really general,
I
right?
agree. Mhm.
Yeah, and I
So
think that works for the racers and the people who aren't racers, because the people who aren't racers that are riding sort of gravel or riding an event can also throw on the road tires and go out and ride the road.
I
So
say especially those people.
yeah,
Honestly, I have
absolutely.
said many times that this is the road bike we should have been selling people all along instead of the twitchy, nervous race bikes that we were selling to people.
Yep.
Like the people who aren't racing, right?
right,
Like
right.
we did not need to sell the general public Tour de France level race bikes.
Mhm.
Because a lot of people didn't do well on them. They were stiff and nervous and not what a lot of people needed.
Yeah, I had
Right.
that conversation with somebody on a gravel ride the other day. They were both were on gravel bikes. There's a couple, and they were both on gravel bikes. And he had a little bit nicer, higher end one, and her bike was a little more entry level. And she was kind of looking to upgrade. And he's talking about getting a road bike. And I think he had a Canon. It was a pretty nice bike. I was like, dude, just what you would spend on a bike, like spend half that on a really sweet wheel set and throw it on there, and you'll have
Yes.
almost the same
Yes.
thing. You know what I mean? Your bike's
Totally.
awesome. Throw on
Yes.
a cool wheel set, and
100%.
that's all you
People
need.
have very little appreciation for that.
Right.
That wheels and tires are in many ways those two triangles are just a vehicle for those wheels and tires because it's amazing what good wheels do.
Yeah, and if you're not really, racing anything really
Totally.
super specific, your
Like
gearing's
a
not going to
crit.
change, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, and it's now like when gearing is all different too, right? So we talk about some of the changes that come with gravel bikes, and gearing is also one of them. And I think even with fat bikes have kind of driven a bit of that. I think the one buys, right?
Yeah,
And
mountain bike, sure. I mean, mountain bikes, you'd be hard pressed to find anything but at this
Hmm.
point.
and do you see that translating more into gravel, or kind of people going like, yeah, I'm gonna, because I guess unless it's like 30%, you can pretty much get up anything if you have what do they run down to now? Probably now I'm dating myself because I think an 11's a small cog, but now they get like 10, right, or something like this. They run like a 1040 or something, right?
The range is pretty spectacular, but I'll tell you what though, the gravel community, I don't even want to say they're split. Most people I talk to who spend a lot of time on their gravel bikes go back to 2x.
Okay.
I had spent a long time on my 1x. My Open came with a 1x. I raced Michigan, the coast to coast, which is 213 miles across Michigan, which is a really rad event. I did Kansas on a 1x, a couple other things, but when you get to events where you're doing a lot of big changes, from flat to hills and trying to stay with packs, you're always hunting for that gear in the middle you don't have. Like I found myself sort of always hunting for some gear that wasn't there. And that doesn't happen to me with the 2x. And a lot of like really hardcore gravel people who travel a lot and use their gravel bikes on the road and group rides have done the same thing. They've just switched back. It's just it's still like the jumps are so big
Right.
that it's hard to keep your cadence. It's hard to keep a comfortable place because you're just not finding that gear. You don't notice that as much on the mountain, but when you're doing long gravel events, you
Yeah.
definitely feel it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll hail back to the 6-speed freewheel days, right? When, you had a 13, 18 and there were 1 2 differences, right? And it was like,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really nice. Sometimes I even get a little bit of like, man, why is it 17 to 19? Why is there no 18 on here? But as the terrain is more subtle, you want those
Right.
smaller differences, and gravel is not about going up super steep stuff mostly. It's more rolling roads, and so you're going to get that kind of those longer and as far as that goes, probably a little bit bigger gear too than, let's say, on mountain biking. Where years ago I took my mountain bike and made it a 2 by, because I was like, why do I have this 50 tooth chainring on this mountain bike? Like, I'm never in this thing really, right? I'm like, so I knocked it down to a 2 by, and it was like, yeah, I could really get by with, like, a 34-44. And it was like, yeah, 4411 is plenty of gear on the mountain bike, because at that time I either can't go any faster because my skills aren't there, or the terrain doesn't allow
Right.
it. But with the gravel, because you got the smaller tires, you're on these gravel roads, the speeds can be higher, and you kind of want to be able to fine tune that gearing, I would suspect then. So
Yeah, and if you're doing something like, I mean, really anything like unpaved down here, Crusher and the Tusher for sure, like anything with a lot of long climbs and flats and different, like the two bys are more helpful.
right, right, yeah, just to be able to have a little bit more selection. And as far as a 2 by, maybe that just went by me. What would you normally run for rings on a 2 by for a gravel bike? What's your recommendation there?
I was afraid you're going to ask me that because I'm the worst. I run what I brung. I I am the worst when it comes to that. I just got the GRX on my upper, and I upgraded, and I'd honestly even have to look it up, but I know it's a little taller than what I would like. I honestly have to look that up. I test too many bikes, so there's so many different gearing
Sure.
variations. You know what I mean? That my memory is, I'm like a goldfish. I'm like, what
Right.
is the gear for this?
Small and medium.
Like, so that's kind of what it comes down to. I will say I love a good Eagle though. When you were talking about mountain bikes, I'm like, I love an Eagle drivetrain.
Right.
Like you can climb up a wall with one of those things.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of weight distribution, and that just kind of makes me think of that. How much of that do you think is plays into the kind of the gravel side? Do you think it plays more to the mountain bikers? Think it plays more to guys that are from a road experience, or is it just such a mix of things, and so
What's that?
developing right now that it's really kind of all over?
You gravel in general?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. I think it's pulling. I think it's pulling from the road more, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Mountain biking is so unique that I think that those are two still very distinct sports. You know what I mean? Like, mountain biking is mountain biking. But gravel, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but we're seeing our numbers down for cyclocross.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that gravel is definitely pulling some people from cyclocross, definitely pulling from the road. I called it in one of my pieces, and I meant it. I think it's like the new American road racing in many ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I think it's taken on a lot of that, depending on your format and those kind of things. I think with our shorter races, it's interesting because it's a little too short for road racers sometimes, but a little too long for cross racers, but a little
That's
too
interesting.
technical for road racers. But we're short. Whereas I think those really long ultra endurance events kind of favor the road racers in that
How long
regard.
does it take people to do your events? About like what's
Um,
beginners doing them in?
I mean, the top guys are doing them in, I don't know, 2.5 maybe.
Okay.
I mean, but that's like some of the cross pros and stuff that come in.
Yeah.
Not the top amateurs necessarily, but they're not way off of that.
Right.
So
But kind of
under
depends on how
3.
muddy. Yeah, depends on how muddy
Wow.
it is too. Obviously, just like you guys, like you said, like you guys will ride. When it's dry, you might ride it on a road bike, but when it's wet, you're like, yeah, I'm not going to touch that. I think
Yeah.
we get a very similar terrain here. So certainly that plays a big difference. And we do them a lot of times in early spring where that mud is almost like peanut butter, and we're able to cover quite a bit of the course with gravel because they are short.
Right.
Sometimes it is really slow just because it's so thick. But
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's definitely it's full. Seems to be. I mean, I think you hit it when you say crosses numbers have been down, and it probably because the gravel races have been going kind of. It's almost kind of a weird season, right? I mean, you're seeing like cross is a little past peak. It's kind of it's kind of
Yeah.
hit its top, and people are always looking for something different. But now you also take gravel has kind of been spring, but it's really been now kind of just going all the way through. And you see these
Yeah.
gravel events to just kind of start early spring up in this region, but they really are going through into the fall now. And it's kind of just kind of saying it just kind of is. It's kind of not really, cross used to be fall and
Yeah.
winter, and much to my dismay, and as is that it kept creeping into summer, and everybody gets to July and they're like, "Oh, cross is coming." I'm like, "Gee,
Crazy, I know.
we used to road race." Shoot, we used to do the last criterium was Oyster Bay Criterium down in Long Island, and that was like second week of October, right? And there was
Wow.
you might remember the Covered Bridges road race that used to be in
Yeah.
PA. Yep,
Yeah.
that was like what, third week of September or something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I felt the same way about mountain bike racing. It totally ate into the mountain bike racing season.
right.
Cross did. Like our first big event was Nittany Cross here. It would be the first weekend in September sometimes. I was like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. So now you got gravel that's kind of overlaying that. And
It's
so,
you can do it from pretty much you could do it year round. I think because there's
Mhm.
there's travel events in Florida that start in January or February. And
Right.
my last race here was November 3rd with Rock and Road.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, you could, Spirit World, that was in Arizona, that was in November. I don't know any in December, but that doesn't mean there isn't one somewhere.
Oh, there's probably
oh,
something.
I'm sure.
So where do you see the trajectory, predictive wise? If you put a predictive model together and say, is the UCI hungry to get in on the action, which of course they probably are, and they'll probably
I can
listen
tell
to
you
this and
USAC certainly is.
well,
Um,
yeah, they definitely need to be, but is it unique enough to the U.S. that UCI is like, it's not a big as deal as because I know like in Norway, because I've had athletes there, I have an athlete there now. Um, they have a lot of mountain bike racing on gravel roads, but it hasn't really
yes.
turned gravel
Yeah.
racing yet,
It
right?
hasn't yet, but I think that's coming. Only and I say that because you look at the popularity of Rift, the one in Iceland. I mean, that
Mhm.
thing blew up out of nowhere. I have people sort of knocking on my door from Israel, from South America, from Italy, because all those roads are there, right?
Sure.
And they're throwing a little gravel in the Tour de France, and people are like, "Ooh!" I mean, I think that it'll definitely creep in. I do think that they are so rooted in their traditions, of road racing and what that is, more so than we are. And that's why, like, I listened to Tim Johnson talk too. He's like, we need to embrace this because Jonathan Botters are like, there's something very uniquely American about this thing. Like, we're more participatory, right? Like we like to participate in our
Mhm.
cycling sports, and it's that sort of rugged individualism. You don't need a team. So I think here it's going to just continue to grow. I think you're gonna see a lot of evolution. Definitely gonna be races that are more pro centric, and then the little grassroots races will come up in their stead, and it's going to go through some growing pains. I think it already kind of is. When Lifetime bought Crusher and the Tusher, I wrote about that, and the response on my pages was overwhelmingly negative, and
Sure.
I felt a little bad for T-Bird because I know his heart, like. And I know the Lifetime people, and they sincerely do not want to buy every single gravel race in America. That's not their game. But I understand the concerns with people like, oh, we don't want this to become this corporate thing. And I don't think it will all be that corporate thing, but they'll be that part of it, for sure there.
Sure. Sure.
That's
And,
kind of been the nature of gravel in general, though, right? Every time something comes out that feels a little too corporate or a little too
Yes.
classic road racey, like the aero bars thing, and
That horse has
you know,
circled the planet already, though.
right?
Like, we got to
Yeah,
get over
we
it.
know
Like,
it.
right.
it's the races where it's if somebody could start it, go ahead and do it. Guitar Ted said, okay, enough. But like, back in the day, they were free, And you could just line up. I think Almanzo might still be free, right? And you just prove that you got to each checkpoint by buying a lottery ticket. And I get it, but they gave Jim Cummins so much grief when he wanted to charge an entry fee. But
Right,
you know,
right.
it, it,
Well,
yeah,
there's going to be an evolution to it, and I haven't seen it crop up with on the Euro scene as much yet. And it's certainly it's developing as an American sport. I mean, albeit track racing was an American sport that got exported to
yeah,
Europe,
fair.
and so who knows? I mean, maybe they embrace it and we don't, and we move on to something else. I don't know, but
It's going to
and
be a while. I think we're
yeah,
still, yeah.
Yeah, there's a
yeah.
lot. I think there's a lot of room for it to continue to grow and stay interesting. With that, can you tell us about some of like the best events that you've been to? You're able to travel to all these great events across the country, and what are some of the things that you're seeing that are unique or really particularly exciting at some of the events that you've done?
Well, it's interesting. I think what's really cool about gravel is that you do really see a place in a very unique way. I mean, I've always felt mountain biking. I always said that about mountain biking, and I traveled the world mountain bike racing, and that was one of the things that I loved about it. But mountain biking racing is intimidating, right? Because not everybody wants to go down rock faces and do all that kind of stuff. So, I feel the same way about gravel. If you go out to um, a grasshopper race in Northern California, you're going to have a very different feel and experience than if you do anything in the Midwest, or if you go down to Land Run in Oklahoma, or, the Great Gator, so it's like a four gator thing in Florida, it's just all flat and through the Everglades, or, like that's what I love about it, is that you really get to experience, like the dirt is different, the ground is different,
Hmm.
your scenery is different. Like everything is very uniquely of that place. And I think that that's what's really, really cool. They're beautiful. And I think that's a huge part of the appeal too. Not that, I thought that like fondos definitely were going to be a thing for a while and are still a thing. But I think that it's still so much about road and speed and packs and all that. And it's just a little bit less about that at gravel events. Like no one is, no one's going to really yell at you. You're not going to be, if you want to ride with a bunch of people, you can, or you don't have to. No one's going to pull you off the course unless you're like way, 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 way off the, off pace.
It's getting
Uh,
dark.
yeah, like I think even then sometimes they let you have lights to finish, but yeah, it's just it's such you don't have to. I think I often liken it to being our marathon, like cyclist marathons.
Hmm.
Like it's something that people would be like, I'm just gonna go do that thing, and they don't really care that much. I mean, they'd like to have a good finishing time, perhaps, but it's really much more experiential.
Yeah, and I think we talked. I think maybe it was back when we talked with Richard Fries a little bit about some, more of the philosophical side. But you kind of get into this sense of adventure, if you will, and
Yeah.
it's a conquering the terrain as much as anything, right? And
Oh,
so yeah, it is, especially like riding a crit or a racing track is like you're either going fast or you're out the back, and
oh,
and then of course, and in a closed forum like that, then it's everybody can see too, and so you have to kind of have a lot of resolve that you're
yeah.
not bothered by the fact that you have a bad day and you get popped. But the gravel, everybody gets popped, just
Yeah,
in
and you can just
some
stop and take
manner.
pictures. No one cares.
Right,
Like
right. So, but you're out there conquering the terrain, and you're like,
yeah,
okay, even if I'm kind of dropped, well, everybody's really kind of essentially dropped. There's really like maybe
yes,
four guys at the front that are really duking it out.
100%.
Everybody else is popped in some manner and fighting back and fighting their own personal battle out there against the elements and trying to get.
Yep.
And so even if you're like, hey, I finished in 4 hours, but man, it was freaking wicked cool, and you can still share a story with a guy that was at 2 hours and say, man, maybe he was 2 hours ahead, but he still fought that same terrain. Oh, did you see that gnarly downhill, or did you get caught up in? You can still participate in the experience with people. It wasn't like
100%.
my experience was kind of like, well, my experience was off the back and birds were chirping and you guys were racing, and you're like, okay, so you don't really have a story to share with anybody on the ride home, but everybody has a story to tell because everybody
No,
comes
that's a
to the thing.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And it's interesting you say that because on a lot of those conversations that I've been party to, no one's even asking when people finished. Like no
Right.
one's like it's a secondary conversation at best. Like a lot of like everyone's talking about that other stuff. They're
Right.
talking about elements of the course. They're talking about stuff they've seen. Like if they're some of the aid stations are super fun in these things. Like they're talking about like everything else. Like at Unpaved they had it was awesome. He made bacon and pierogies because this is like a really cold day. So they had espresso bacon and pierogies at one of the aid stations. And if you're not racing it, people just racked their bike, and
Yeah.
stood around the fire and had some snacks and then went on to do the next part of the course.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
the aid stations, that's a lot of fun. I love seeing where people get creative. I did Jeremy Powers this ride that he does for Jam Fund, and they had an ice cream truck at one of the stations, and at the
Totally.
place where I needed to sit there and eat ice cream
When you
for
needed
like
to sit down and have
25
some
minutes. I was like,
Right.
I'm
Well,
sick going up these hills. I'm just gonna eat some ice cream for a while.
Well, it reminds me a little bit too. Jason Hillmeyer and I did El Reto de Quetzal. It's this mountain bike stage race in Guatemala, and I talked him into going to this thing. And it was a roadie, right? So a roadie takes this mountain bike guy to Guatemala to do the stage race, and it was just so freaking hard though. And I just remember we'd come to this aid station, and it's at altitude. We're climbing these stupid volcanoes, right? So you're 10,000 feet, and this one aid station had like watermelon. And and we were just so gassed, because it was at altitude, we're tired, we've been on our bikes for like 6 hours already trying to race, and you had to race this as a team and show up at these aid stations
I've
within
done those. Yeah.
oh my god, so you know exactly right. We were just so gassed, we're like, I'm eating another piece of watermelon because you know what, the extra minute that I stand here isn't gonna make any difference because we got 2 more hours to go.
Totally. And you know what? That extra, I've told people this, especially at gravel events, and you know who Alan Lim is, the guy that did Scratch
Yeah.
Labs, and yeah. So he's got a similar philosophy, and I think it's true. Sometimes that extra minute that you stop and eat that salted watermelons or whatever, like that you literally stop and just let yourself rest for a second and digest that food, can actually save you hours at the end of that race. When it's
Yeah.
that long and hard,
Yep.
to actually just take that little extra time to take care of yourself at that aid station and let your gut settle down, let your core temperature cool for a minute, can keep you from like cracking like an egg 3 hours later and then just going backwards.
Yeah,
I am a
precisely.
firm believer in that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it's really, you just have to, you have to kind of just realize it. I mean, things are just so long, and it's like,
So long.
it's yeah, that minute is inconsequential in the big scheme. But it also reminded me when you're talking about some of this stuff, is like, yeah, and some of our best stories, like, I don't even remember what we placed. We were somewhere middle of the road, right? But it didn't matter. We were just freaking going as hard as we could all the time, right? And just trying to get over this stuff, and it was just crazy. These hike-a-bike sections, and it was just all crazy, wild, out in the jungle. It was nuts, but we have such great memories of it, and that's the stuff we remembered more than anything, because it was this adventure to just get through it.
Totally.
Regardless
That's
of
totally cool.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting when you win, but it's really great to have an event like that where you have such great fond memories of it, and you maybe not even crack the top 10. I mean, it's like that's
right.
way much more worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, especially and those kinds of, I mean, sure. I mean, when the gun went off, I was all intending on winning, and then until some guy kicked my teeth in and was gone on some technical section, and I was like, I just gotta get over this freaking thing. So,
Like, okay, reset the goals.
Yeah, all right, new goals, finish. Exactly. But I think gravel really satisfies that for a lot of people. It's kind of like hard enough to be an adventure, but not so over the top that you're like, I don't want to die because I got this exposed ledge cliff I can ride on, and and whatever.
Totally.
So
100%. That's very much how I feel about it. Yeah.
So
awesome.
there's no doubt you have a long list of racing accomplishments. How is it that you go from that experience to writing about cycling? And I know you have a long list of writing accomplishments as well, but how did those things kind of come together? I'm really interested in that concept.
Well, it's funny. I was a writer, with my fingers on a keyboard first. Okay. So, I was a medical writer in Philadelphia. So just doing like literally medical writing for publications that went to doctors. So it was, I'd go to medical conferences and write them up and that kind of thing. And I really I wanted to get into consumer writing. So I kept sending resumes to Rodale Press, which was the bicycling publisher at the time, and they kept sending me nice rejections. And then at some point, some point I got a headhunter found my pile of rejected resumes and called me, and I got the job. I got a job writing books in the book division of Rodale Press, which I didn't even know that people got hired to do such things. But then I ended up just riding bikes with the people at bicycling, and they were like, "You're pretty good at this. You ever think about racing?" And I was like, "No. No, I'm not gonna race." And they roped me into doing. I did 2 races. I did a road race here and then a mountain bike race in Philly, and I won both of them. And they were like, "See," so that kind of started it. And I went from that to them going, "Why don't you write for us?" And I was like, "I don't know. Why don't I write for you?" So that it really just sort of rolled together like that. I was already a trainer. If I was always into some sort of fitness. I played ball sports in high school and ran track and stuff, but rode a bike just for fun. I didn't know people raced them. So I those things in my life just came together. It just really was. I feel very fortunate. I was sort of meeting the right people at the right time in my life and getting really great opportunities.
Yeah,
And
that's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
So,
it is. It really is.
I mean, those are two of my favorite things, writing and cycling. So the fact that you've put them together and put them together so well, I think is really admirable. Can you got anything interesting you're working on right now that you can tell us about?
What am I working on right now? That's a great question. I am starting to try to work on something right now. I co-authored a book with Stacy Sims. She's the woman who says women are not small men. She spent all of her life studying women's specific physiology and nutrition, and really, because like most of medical science, research on sports medicine and sports nutrition was only ever done on men because women are messy. Women get periods, women get pregnant, women's hormones change. So we're not easy science. But all those things actually affect performance a lot too. And she was like, we should maybe study this and work with women. So I saw her speak at a coaching conference. It might have been 2015. And it's the first time I ever heard somebody say menstruation in a coaching conference. I was like, wow, okay, this is amazing. And I followed her out the door and I was like, you need a book and I'm going to do it with you. And she's like, okay, cool. And I was like, all right, that was easy. And then we sort of like she's super busy and we were hashing it back and forth. I worked with her with the launch of Osmo, their women's specific nutrition. She had me go out and like climb Mount Tam a bunch of times and like pee on pee sticks and see how much protein we were losing. It was ludicrous. But anyway, so wrote a book with her. It's done super, super well. She did a TED Talk on it. So there's been a lot of people asking us to maybe do a follow-up with just like older women, like menopausal women, because that's a chapter in the book, but you could really write a whole book on, different populations within the women's market. So yeah, I've been compiling stuff on that, which is, it's always a very, very messy process to get something like that rolling, but I'm excited about her work, and I'm excited about that it's finally getting the attention that it really, truly deserves.
Well, that's the book you're referring to is Roar.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I have that on my Kindle, and I just haven't gotten to reading it yet. And I downloaded it a couple weeks back, and I was like, because I've been with working with a few women athletes that I have, and it's like, man, I really wanna dig into this because I really want to maximize your performance and really tracking those hormonal shifts and adjusting the training to that and seeing the benefits. So far it's been kind of too soon to tell, other than psychologically it's a big boost when they're feel like, okay, I'm in a good space mentally to do this because I feel better about it, and
Totally.
but
And just the fact that you're paying attention helps. I mean, truly.
Sure.
I mean, the fact that you're paying attention helps a lot. And I would encourage you, if you're going to hone in on anything sort of early on, like the nutrition piece is really, really useful. Because
Okay.
one of the things that, myself, always be like, there'd be times when I was just, if I could not keep my core temperature normal, I would just have lots of trouble staying um, well hydrated. And it's just, I didn't know that your blood plasma shifts. You can be down 8% before your period, like in those premenstrual times. That's huge. Like to
Right.
not have that part of your blood that you need to sweat is enormous. And there's stuff that you can do about that. Like those are really easy early hits that you can make people feel better quickly.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna now even more encourage you to get into because I've been reading these other shorter white papers and articles and things, and I've kind of stored away kind of this, what I'm gonna say is quote, put it in quotes, enough information, but I got enough to get myself kind of
Yeah.
rolling on it and at least adjust the training, and it's just growth as a coach too, and it's like I had. I probably have the most women on my roster right now that I've had collectively at one time, and it's but you mostly work with men, and you're like, okay, it works, and I've
Yep.
always been kind of benefited from. I kind of have like a cast iron stomach, and most things just don't bother me, so
Yeah.
it's an advantage, but it's a disadvantage because then it makes you less sensitive to people that are sensitive to things, and you're like, oh man, dude, you'll be fine, and then kind of reading some of this stuff and saying, no, this is like a real thing, and for women to have to deal with these things beyond
Oh
just
yeah.
the really
This.
superficial obvious things.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, and if we can maximize those things and coordinate them, I'm like, this is really powerful, and I'm excited about learning more about it because I want to see them excel and kick the crap out of other people.
Oh,
I
yeah,
want to see
no,
them win
totally. That's
stuff,
great. I'm
So
very excited. It's great to hear. Like, I like to hear when male coaches are, getting that and embracing that, and really just helping. A lot of women never got the message that anyone is listening or cares, or that they should pay attention to it. So even just knowing that you're on board and them paying attention to, like, oh yeah, you're right. I do feel like this at this point, and maybe we should try some strategies about that. Like, you don't have to master it, there's
right.
no, because it's hard. I mean, though that physiology is a little slippery, and also it changes from month to month even, but if you can just get a general gist of how things feel, it goes a long way.
Right, right. And I always try to be very adaptable too. So yeah, knowing that things, it's like, as precise as we like to be with power meters and all these kinds of things, and realizing like, well, guess what? It might shift by a couple of days and we have to just
Yeah, totally.
adapt. And so we're gonna
Yep.
adapt. And okay, so
Yep.
it's okay. And we just make the change and we roll. And but just, attuning more into that. And it's like, I did with juniors years ago, realizing like, juniors are not just small adults. They have different
Right.
needs as well, nutritionally and
Totally.
different things where it's like it's really easy to overlook and just like, yeah, keep going, and then they can't. But realizing that women are not just, as you, I think, leading off our podcast tonight even was, women are not just smaller men, and
Yep.
beyond the obvious things, like man, real things to deal with, and man, if we can tune into those things and pay attention, and even if we don't do it perfectly, we can do better, and we can keep getting better and keep learning.
Totally. Yeah.
So I think it's exciting stuff. I think I could probably wind up having about a 5-hour podcast with you. So so or a long road trip after a gravel race. So
That'd be
um,
fun.
yeah, absolutely. So, but no, this was great. It was great having you on here for sure. And just being able to kind of dig into the gravel scene. I know Tony was definitely hungry because he has the gravel series. I'm just kind of an onlooker for the gravel part, and just kind of. It's been sitting this one out as far as the gravel racing goes. I'm like, no, I'm good. I got enough disciplines going on right now. I gotta stay focused a little bit. So,
It'll be there for you. It'll be
I,
there.
We'll
It'll
get
be
him
there.
racing out. Maybe we'll come down
Yeah.
to Monkey Knife Fight. Get
There
him
you
racing
go.
there. Like, come down in March.
There you go.
Sweet, sweet. So, well, cool. Yeah, I think we covered a lot of ground tonight, and super psyched. And I'm even more excited now. Like, I probably should get the gravel book because I know there's some stuff in there that I want to read, and I know you've had it out for a few weeks, and I keep going like I gotta download that, but then I go to download, I'm like I still got Roar to read. I haven't read that yet, So
Yeah, no, so much, so much.
you're
But
pumping out material fast.
yeah, that's my job.
Uh,
But yeah, I mean, the gravel thing is not just, I mean, as as you'll see, it talks a lot about which anybody can benefit from, mental grit. I call the chapter grit, but that mental training that gets you through the inevitable tunnel that you're going to go through, because these races are designed to go through some dark tunnels, and you got to know how to get sort of like through that. So there's a lot of stuff in there. The nutrition, all that stuff is useful pretty much no matter what surface you're on.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. Those are the two sections that I will go back and read and reread. I guarantee you. I was thinking about that before we started talking, that the mental section and nutrition are really good and thorough and stuff that you can go through multiple times and get something out of. So really glad to have it.
And
Cool.
and both Gravel and Roar and the other book, they're all on. Are they on Kindle as well? Are they Kindle versions?
Oh, Roar is definitely on Kindle version. People keep bugging me about Climb and Gravel. I have no pull at all with the powers that be, though I keep saying people would like them on Kindle. I don't think either of them is yet. Climb just came out last year, and Gravel is brand new.
Right.
But my hope is that they will eventually get there.
Yeah, definitely. That's my impetus to always read more, because I can sync across devices, and if I'm, hey, you got to wait for somebody at the bank or whatever, like fine by me, I'm gonna read my book, So, so awesome. We'll have people look for they're at least on Amazon, even if not in
Totally.
in Kindle version, that they can go pick up Gravel and get the it's basically, it is the Gravel Bible at this point. So many congratulations and many thanks to you for writing that. And thank you for joining us tonight and sharing a bit of your story and knowledge with us.
Thanks a lot. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Great. We'll talk to you soon.